Good morning. I am higher vibrations, and so are you. And I am so excited to introduce my next guest. Dr. Joe is somebody that I've talked to on and off for quite some time now. So it's just been he's been in my field for a while. It's really fun to be able to have these kind of conversations because this is the rare time we actually get to chat. So anyway, thank you for coming all the way from across the pond. Dr. Lightheart, I see you put your name as.
Yeah, Dr. Lightheart, I call myself that, but I look miserable most of the time. But but my heart's always open and chuckling on the inside. I was just looking here, sorry to be a nuisance, but I've got onto my Facebook. Oh, it's happening now, yeah.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah, it's on. I see you have a paired friend here saying hello.
Oh, jolly good.
Team
Yeah,
beans.
because it's important that we get ourselves out there, isn't it?
Um, Man, so a lot has been happening. A lot has been happening. We were just starting to talk about something. Do you want to jump right into that, or should we go into your show? Because I have a couple of comments about your show that you just recently had with Elsa too.
Yeah, whatever you like. I don't care. Let's just go with the flow and see what comes up. I never prepare anything. You see, that's my thing.
Okay.
I don't even put notes down. But having said that, I think I'm getting the push to just put a few notes down
All right.
now. Because I tend to be sort of spontaneous or extemporaneous. I think they call it if you're using posh words, and that means to work without a script. That's
Yeah,
how I live my life now, really.
I love it. I typically do too. I actually, this is except for saying, like, sometimes I'll put a note, like to say, happy 4/4 portal, everybody. Like, I wrote that down and I still didn't use that note. That's usually the kind of note that I put down. Like, I don't typically write notes, but for some, that's why it's so peculiar. And I want to use them a little bit because usually my note taking is during the conversation. And then I'm like, okay, that's coming in and download. So I'm going to write that down instead of interrupting somebody. You know what I mean? And like, but for one reason or another, I got 3 pages.
Oh Christ!
But I'm just going to jump into the one that the reason I started writing in the first place is that we just had this amazing transient with the Mercury, which is in retrograde right now, right? Mercury's thoth, however, some people say thought. Everybody pronounces it however it is correct for them. And so Mercury has been in retrograde and is leaving retrograde motion on the 7th for the Northern Hemisphere, the 8th for the Southern Hemisphere. Anyway, why is this significant? Is that an activation just happens like down low, like a lot of people didn't even know this was going to happen. Like I didn't know about it, I experienced it. And so we kind of briefly touched on it before the show today, but it not only did it crossed over into its north node, which is in Pisces, and this brought in a super big activation that went across the board for a lot of us. It's honoring, and it's also got a lot to do with four. So anyway, in the fact that it's 4/4 portal today, there's a lot of things I can go into to kind of explain it. Instead of I can just say, we just pierced the veil in a way that we've not done before. We have just crossed over the precipice or the threshold into a frequency that we and these bodies have never stood in before. We are now merging into timelines that have been unwritten, which hadn't happened before. And so a lot of us experienced this energy, like it felt almost like an impending doom was coming in. It was like subtle for me because I've been in euphoria land since the 25th. But there's and it came in and I knew that I was supposed to observe it. And then in that very moment, I was reminded, this was a whole thing with spirit by myself outside, um, of the number of people who, for one reason or another, have yelled at me this past week or so, and like, and it's just so, it's funny to me because it has no bearing. It makes no sense why they're upset. And so, but what's weird is in this period I've been able to not be affected by the people upset. I'm just trying to not chuckle. And the reason for this is, and then I'll give it back to you, is The reason for this, they showed me because I was wondering, I'm like, why is that? It's just so bizarre that so many people are upset right now over random things that have nothing to do with me. Um, and they showed me that these are a different type of activation for us because we operate at this really wide energy bubble, sure. Though when we have these types of distortions come in, we intentionally expand that bubble. We push it out, like in a natural response to clean the energy, transmute the energy before you. And we're being asked to do that more regularly. When we allow ourselves to do that in service for ourselves and others, then it doesn't come in as contrary energy as common, or distortion. So I don't know. That seemed like it segued into what you were talking about before.
Yeah, perfectly. I understand perfectly, and I've been feeling it myself. I've nearly been knocked off my feet a few times in the last 3 days. With the energies that are coming in, and exhaustion. I think exhaustion is just, you've done well, son. Take it easy now and be kind to yourself for a while, because we'll be knocking on the door in 2 hours' time. You know what I mean? So it's like they're coming in big tidal waves. This new energetic, or these new frequencies.
Yeah.
And now my big thing is that if I'm feeling emotionally disturbed, is not to react. It's to sit with it, no matter
Yeah.
how painful it is, right? To sit with it and let it dissipate in our bodies, because it's the soul knocking on our physical body to say, get out of the way. I'm coming through to flush all the shit away, and you're keeping hold of it. So what is all the shit? Excuse my French, but these are the words I use. It's what is the shit? It's old ideas, emotions, and attitudes, the formative forces of our life that we've previously conducted our life with, that no longer serve us in any way, shape, or form. And I think people say we've got to get rid of our ego. I don't talk in that terms. I think we've got to get rid of the bonds that are attached to the fear and the pride of the former ego self, because I think there is such a thing as a normal, healthy, balanced ego, because
Yeah.
it's there. It's to do with instincts and intellect and defending ourselves, which we need, to go forward on planet Earth. These are just the things I've learned myself, really, and I didn't have a clue. Miller, I didn't have a clue. Most of the time, I still haven't got a clue. People think I know. You're right. I don't bloody know. And like you said, this is not about revolution and doing the same thing over and over, although lots of people are doing that.
Right.
Evolution means it's like the symbology of the unicorn's horn. It's a spiral dynamic that's going out now into see, I've got a thing coming up my spine, so must be telling the truth. It's a new charter, although it's an old charter, because we have been here before, because we created it at some level. And I find that hard to get my head around. But
Yeah.
I am and my Father are one. Jesus or Yeshua is supposed to have said that. I don't think he was saying I am God. I think he was saying that I have a direct communication and connection, and so does everybody else, because he's reputed to have said there'll be people coming along who can do better magic tricks than me in the future, and I think that that's us. I think that we are that. However, I think our individual souls that are trying to come in have got individual unique frequencies with particular skill sets. And I think our job is to express from the deepest level who we are, not who we're pretending to be.
Yeah.
What do you think about that then?
Very much. Very much. I've been noticing. Well, one of the points that I'm going to grab out real quick that I feel is really important to emphasize. You mentioned it. It's that it our ego is an operating program that is required for the system to run. Like,
Absolutely.
and people talk about, and a lot of people, not everybody, but in the spiritual community, you'll hear a lot about kill the ego, death to the ego, and like I've never resonated with that. You know what I mean? And now I understand why. It's if you delete an operating program that's, keeping your system, your computer, let's use that example, if it's keeping it healthy and capable to run, then you're going to make it so it's not going to run very well, you know? Um, and the difference truly is understanding that the ego is, rather than the driver, a passenger in the car of this life that you're in, and not having to uh, rely on it as much. People had been giving it, not only was it the driver, but it was the car itself, the fuel, the map, it was everything. And so taking the wheel sometimes is scary because then you feel responsible, you're accountable, you know. But once you can spiritually do this, you can take it's releasing control is actually how you find control, ironically,
It is.
maybe not ironically.
It
And
is.
it's
I agree. I mean, that's lovely because I see it the same way. I mean, I didn't know that I had an internal operating system that I could turn my eyes the other way around and tap into it, you know. And I think I sort of, my life is now chauffeur driven. You know, I'm basically sitting in the back seat, but every now and then I'll say, can we go left and have an ice cream or something like that, you know, and I sort of get that choice now, you know,
yeah,
and like you say, it's about letting go to get hold of, isn't it? You know,
yeah.
so you sort of get this like two-headed approach to it. It's like guru head, isn't it, really? You know, yeah, it's an irony and everything's sort of dual, but in order to get out of that duality, if we come into our hearts, that unifies those two forces and they cooperate with one another rather than fighting against one another. You know, I mean, I mean, people used to say this to me, and I try and get hold of it intellectually, but I don't think that we have to grow. I think that we get grown. I think if you surrender, right, something in us starts to flourish and grow us, really. You know, and I think that's the problem with people. They think they have to apply some force and apply some effort and keep fighting against the dark forces that reside out. To me, that's bollocks now, you know, but I used to think like that. But I've come to a point now where I think differently.
Yeah, yeah. I resonate with that so much. That's the slow release of control has been a series of years,
Yeah.
and you know it's something that's a process, you know, and each of the steps are just as important as any other, you know, and for me it worked out where at the beginning of lockdown, federal lockdown, so like it was May 2020, all of a sudden we went from saying, oh, we got all this land and we're off grid, so I don't have to worry about all this lockdown stuff, to we're homeless, me and a 5-year-old, you know,
Yeah.
like, and it was the best thing. That I wouldn't ask that to happen to anyone, of course, but it was truly for me the best thing that could have happened. I was taught step by step how to release control. And through that process, I had learned to liberate myself,
Yeah.
you know, knowing that we were safe and that everything was going to be just fine. And in doing that as well, you find that you're allowing yourself to actually begin to truly manifest your reality once you release control and go with the flow of spirit. It's soft, it doesn't push, but at the same time, over a series of years, it can break down stone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, you know, that still small voice occasionally screams, will you turn left for God's sake? You know,
Yeah.
I've been telling you for 3 years now, stop turning right, just go left for a day, you know, and stuff like that, really. So I think it's developing a relationship with that intuitive, innate intelligence that's in us, you know. And I have a picture in my mind, right? It's like little Yoda, you know. I go down through these sort of dark, dingy, smelly sort of pathways, passages, and I come to this place that's got a sandy floor, and there's like a real old font, you know, like a font of old knowledge. And he's sitting on it, and he just like when I go and sit with him, he say, "How are you getting on, son?" You know, and I almost like have a chat there because that suits me. I can change the picture any time I like, but I'm really comfortable with that, really, you know.
Yeah.
And he is the only one I trust, to be honest with you, you know, because I look at the world now. It's hard to differentiate the true from the false now because you know it's just very interesting. But how do I know what's true for me? By the way that I feel. And if I feel open and flowing, I just keep going. And I don't really question it much more than that now, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can feel on many levels in this inside place that is your energy field or whatever. You know, we have sometimes assigned areas of our body or chakras to signal certain, you know, everybody has their own methodology. Everybody has their own thing. And so I think that's where we fall. and into that spiral of comparing each other, that part, it doesn't do us very much good.
Yeah,
But
well, that's one of the things. I mean, I got my start really in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's where they pointed me back to myself. It was long. I've
you
just
just
come up to
celebrate
30.
it.
Yeah, 33 years. A couple of days ago, and to me, 33. Well, look, it's coming up again now for some reason. When I'm in tune, right, I get like, right, son, keep going. So I was saying to Elsa the other evening, because I don't really bother with numerology or astrology and stuff like that, because I tend to sort of just try and find some joy in the day, really. So even if somebody said to me, oh, Mercury's in retrograde and you need to watch Uranus and all that sort of business, it wouldn't really bother me too much, because I know I'll be able to handle it if I keep close to what my intuition's telling me. So it's become relatively simple for me. It's not to say that I don't make cock-ups, because I do, and I'm all right with that, but the thing with me is when I get tired and I still keep trying to drive myself on, that's when I make most of the mistakes, because there's still a thing in me to say, grit your teeth, son, get on with it, because you'll get there in the end. And I know that that's a self-destructive streak in me, really, and I find it very difficult to stop doing what I'm doing and actually take some time out to care for myself. So those sort of self-destructive, lack of self-worth tendencies are deeply embedded, not only in me, but in a lot of humanity, I think, really.
Oh yeah. I actually am very familiar with AA. In an earlier time in my life, everybody who I knew were recovering alcoholics.
Yeah.
And it just, for a time, I actually thought I was too. I was wrong, but I still did the steps, and I found some serious like profound life-changing results from doing them, particularly the fourth step and the fifth step, ninth step, like I studied the books and I went to the book studies and did the whole thing, and I don't regret a single moment of it. Like I learned so much, and I was able to there. I came from a weird background. I came from a strange upbringing where there weren't a lot of guidances given in the world, and emotional health was not something that we were ever taught yet. And I found these aspects, these parts that were missing in me in AA,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
I always get excited when I hear you quote something from the big book, because I know it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know where that came from.
But that's my Bible, if you like, and it's sort of embedded in me now, because I went to that many meetings and I still go to meetings, and you sit there, and stuff just washes over you, and you sort of get a dingle. This. Pay attention to this, Joe, because this is relevant for where you're up to at the moment and stuff. And like you, Mel, I know that I know next to nothing about things, really, because there's too much good stuff going on, and I only ever feel like I'm scratching the surface here, And when I look back, I can't even identify with that person who was 33 and a few months ago. I don't know who he was, but I know he was a frightened little child, right? Pretending, because I still had loads of qualifications then, pretending to be academically like gifted, right? And not having a clue what was going on. Because on the one hand, because everything was pretentious, everything was duck and dive, dodge and weave, and defensive, And the drink for me, it relaxed me. And then it let this bloody demon out as well, So I never know who I was going to be, because the promise I always made to me and the people around me was, I swear to you, I'm only going to have 2 drinks and then I'll be home after that. just going to pop in, say hello to the lads, see what's going on, and I'll be home, right? And then we'll take the kids out and we'll go and have something to eat and all that. I took a drink and the drink took me. And I know how that works now, It's a spiritual thing. I didn't have a clue, In AA, they say, some people say, my name's Joe, I'm an alcoholic. Some people say I'm a recovered alcoholic. Some people say I'm a recovering alcoholic. I understand both of those, because I've recovered from the alcohol side of it, but I'm still recovering my soul's purpose. Right. And that's where I'm up to today. And the soul's purpose, in my view, never ends, because it's eternal progress of the soul, with the ego and the human being as the vehicle through which it experiences pain and suffering and joy and everything else,
Right.
or something like that.
That was well said. And thank you for sharing that about yourself. Sometimes it's kind of a, everybody wants to share so much about themselves, so I won't ever ask those types of personal things. So I appreciate that when you do share. Thank you for doing that. Because, well, there's a lot of different reasons, but there's a lot of people, I would say almost every person in the awakening, in some regard or another, have had a history of chemical use or something, because we've come to this place of density where our bodies, our soul body is 222. We're not acclimated to this distortion that we've come down to, and I feel like that it's been a way to cope for a lot of people. And eventually, that once we find that there's nothing useful coming from that world, we slowly transition to another side, and into this being sober, being clean. Has more to do with, it's all encompassing. It's turned, for me, it started in AA when I was first going. And I for me personally, I found that I wasn't an alcoholic, but I still didn't want to stop going.
Yeah,
I
makes
was,
sense.
yeah, I was still getting a lot of things. My closest friends were there, stuff like that. But it's funny too, because my sobriety date was April 1st also.
Brilliant. Brilliant. No such thing as a coincidence, as they say.
Yeah. But the part I wanted to mention there is that it's not always chemicals. It's not always, it's some type of addictive escapism. Some video games is probably one of the most common ones, or like movies, TV, those types of things. And being able to not have to compare and see who's more, addicted or not, is not the point here. Is that we all had something, and now it's time for us to evolve past that, through that, into the evolution of our soul that we're in now, right?
Yeah.
And to make
No,
peace with.
I agree, and I think everybody on the planet seems to be going through a personal rock bottom. I think it's important to hit that rock bottom when you've tried to think your way out of it and you just can't come to a solution. That's a really, really good place to be. It doesn't feel like that. But if you understand the next move in spiritual terms, it's actually the ceiling to the next. So it's ascension, really. If you just sit long enough, something almost like gets underneath you and pushes you through the ceiling. And then when you look back down, and this is just my experience, you go, shit, right? Yeah. It's so simple, and it's like my friend used to say, all the problems are like pole vaulting over mouse turds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But on the one side of it, everything's a massive mountain that can't be climbed, and on the other side, it's what was all that about? And I look at the stuff that I was worried about, and most of them were natural urges, natural tendencies. I was brought up in a very, very strict Irish Roman Catholic background, so the mention of certain things, right, were a sin. It was a sin. So when all these natural urges started to come up, I felt, because I didn't want to upset my mum and dad or the priest and whatever. So you swallow these impulses down, and they have to find some sort of a way to express themselves, And that to me is when all the trouble starts. And when I drank, they all came back online and caused absolute chaos, Right. So I look back now, and it's like a big hoot to me now, right? But also what used to come out as well is I was a gross people pleaser, and I would be going round, right, like Uriah Heep, with a hump on my back, like Quasimodo. So that was all that other energy that was trying to find its way out in a big hump. But not only that, there's all sorts of years and years of unexpressed anger. And I was like, people were terrified of me when I got to a certain point. It used to, and I tried to get shut of all this, playing rugby, so they give me the ball, and I was like some sort of a tank, But I look back and it's so pathetic. And now my thing is, Amelia, is if I've got an open and flowing heart and I don't have any sort of grip in my gut, then I'm on the right path. I don't even look for a solution. I just keep going, because it's almost like that guides me to the next bit of fun or challenge.
Yeah. Man, you perfectly segued into something really that this a profound thing that happened last night. So for me, I was in downloads all day yesterday. That was my day yesterday. Like literally, it worked out great because I didn't have anywhere to be, and I was so glad. But part of that download talked about what you had mentioned. Actually, like you had already mentioned it before a little bit too. Is so the science of the brain is something I've always been very fascinated with, and I've always just been real intrigued by it. I don't claim that I know a lot about it, but what I do is what's been really mostly given to me by spirit, and weird code and stuff. You know how that works. And anyhow, um, so it turns out that what's actually been happening is that what spirit told me was that the reason that we are becoming something more rather than something new is that you are, instead of learning something new, you're becoming something more, you're returning to your truer self. And in so doing, this is called recollection or remembering. When you remember, you use your hippocampus. The hippocampus is at the base of your brain, almost all the way to the base of your brain. It's close to your pineal gland, but just the way the brain is shaped, it looks like that. Just below that is the brain stem. And people call the brain stem a lot of different words. That's the word I'm using. However, that comes from a joke of a life long ago where I used to fly fish all the time. Anyway, it turns out that the brain stem is actually what's called by some groups the reptilian brain, and I've only just discovered that, but they put this together for me last night. Is that what's happening while we recall more and more? They showed me on like you were inside your people's heads, and the hippocampus area of the brain, which is actually responsible for long-term memory rather than the memory altogether, is being filled with this light, this ball of white, brilliant, pure white light. And what it's actually doing is it's swelling over the reptilian brain. Now, there's no mistake or coincidence regarding, the reason that people say that low self-worth talk is always the back of their head is because that's the reptilian brain. And this is a program. I know this sounds a little crazy, but I'm going to keep going because this is the download I got, and it makes so much sense to me. Is when that swelling of the light happens, it pushes out that other voice. It pushes out that low self-worth talk. It sounds like our own voice. So we a lot of times don't even notice that it's there. We've gotten accustomed to it being there. Shame, blame, remorse, low self-worth. And that has been a mechanism to keep our frequency just diminished enough. So that program's turning off. And in comes self-love.
Perfect. I agree entirely. I see that the reptilian brain, I mean, that's the bit that's responsible for freeze and the freeze, really, because fight and flight comes in a little bit further up than that, in the social mammalian brain. But what I see is the root chakra, right? The brain stem is connected to the spinal cord, so it comes in, and when we get on the root, right, there's only one way in, right? There's no way out. There's only one way in. So there's not this and that. There's only one. I'll try and explain this in terms of spheres of consciousness. And then when we get a bit further up, then the mammalian part of our brain comes in. That's when we get this and that. Okay, so we've got the duality comes in then. So it's a single way, then duality comes in. Then there's a crisscrossing over that, right? And in the end, we meet at the crown chakra and it unifies again and goes out to the next one. So we go into the root of our next evolutionary process. So that's the way I see these things. And I think what's happening is there's a great big shift in consciousness that's a feminine energy, and it's causing people's kundalini to rise, right, and start to express itself. Well, if you don't know this and you've been brought up in a very repressive root and sacral chakras, right, then you're going to start getting feelings of an almost human nature, and you're going to start getting angry and furious. They call it the fury. So what comes with it is there's the fury and all those other feelings, right? And I honestly believe, Mela, that a lot of the stuff that goes on in ladies, particularly in women, right? Um, a lot of stuff like endometriosis and all that is caused because of repressed sexual energy. I don't normally call it sexual energy, but it's sacral energy. And I think what's happening now is that we're being shown now how all this psychological and spiritual stuff that's been repressed has caused dis-ease. And we're being shown now that we can actually start letting go of this stuff. Now, that's why I think I'm just going to say what I'm going to say here. I think women's groups are good because you can all talk about that sort of stuff that's happening, and men can talk about the same sort of stuff because it's happening in men as well, you know. And I think one of the big things I found about AA is that I would hear somebody sharing honestly from the heart and think, Christ, I'm no longer alone with these feelings now. There's other people who are actually going through it. And I think that's the strength of community. If people express themselves honestly, right, from the heart and say what's really happening, not what they think should be happening, I think that's what really helps people. So even this conversation might be helping people who are just a bit unsure at the moment. So if you're starting to feel all those energies that you tried to push down when you were going through adolescence, the idea would be is to allow them to come up gently and express themselves in all sorts of ways, really. But the big thing about it is it's all about, above all, do no harm, if at all possible. That's the watch phrase for me is, you know, if it's harming somebody directly and you're in this furious state because look what they've done to me, if you point that finger out, you're missing the point that you signed up for this. And so really the lessons are coming to you so you can find out. I feel like a preacher now, but I'm just going to keep going. The lessons are coming to you so you can find out how you set the ball rolling initially. Nobody did it to you without your permission at some level. Yeah. Good God.
Yeah. In fact, I've actually tuned in when my higher self was making a decision for me, and me and my body was shouting, "Stop!" Like, oh no, I'm good. I don't need any more trauma to heal. That actually was right before I left Washington. I didn't know what they were picking up, but they're picking up trauma for me, and I found out what it was later on, and it was, but you know, it happens only because usually that's not that done that way. But it is in order to assist you to that next thing that can't not be obtained, or you cannot get to that place until you've done this and this and this. It's like trying to skip steps on a stairway. You know, like sometimes you can do it, but most of the time we come crashing down.
And I think you're right, because I get told all the time, tell them, Joe, that's you lot out there, tell them, right, that your intuition will guide you to the next action that you need to take. It won't be some health coach. The health coach might get it right every now and then by mistake, but your intuition will say, work on this today, right? And tomorrow you get a different job to do, because this is about quantum disentanglement. So you'll take actions, the knots will start to release because they're the bonds that you've constructed yourself, either through fear or pride or arrogance or whatever. These are the things that need to be released now, but you'll have to undo the knots yourself by taking specific action. So it's a sequential letting go. I'm on one tonight. I can feel it. You know, I was knackered before I came on here now, but I feel full of oomph, really.
Right on. Yeah, yeah. There's definitely incoming energy right now. There's there's another part that goes to this. I'm going to add this. Is it turns out, so what's actually happening is that time is no longer part of the role and which we're living within. And that's a lot easier said than done. I totally get that, because we're living in a place of time. But as this time is being pulled up, it's in the book of Matthew 24. I'm not a Bible person. However, Spirit suggested this passage, and that never happens. It never happens. And so I went to it, and it talked about the shortening of the days, that the days will slow down or speed up. I mean, time will speed up the quickening for, they called it them the chosen, them is us, all of us, you know. And so as time is as sped up, many of us are like knocking ourselves out of the spin of time. And so like time can be had in a very fluid way. It's bizarre. I've just been doing this past couple of days where like I'm sure I've, you know, I looked last looked at the clock, I had 2 hours before I had to do something, and then like I would look at it again 2 hours later and it was only 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But that's only when I'm enjoying and wanting the time to slow.
Yeah.
It's so
No,
bizarre.
I agree. There's so much time things going on, not distortions as such, but new. It's just like new stuff, isn't it? New feelings. It's a bit like when you drink alcohol or you take some drug substances and stuff like that. On some of them, but I see it opposite. You see, I think that as the information's coming in, it seems that time slows down. It alters your processing mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
So as it's coming in more quickly, everything goes slower. It's like a paradoxical situation, really. But you know, all this, I don't fully understand jumping from one dimension to the next, but it happens to me
Yeah.
unconsciously. But I think we're being given the ability now to actually, through breathing and through emotional changes, we can actually start to choose now the direction that we can go in astral travel. It's a bit like, I don't know whether you've ever seen Stargate, but they dial in different coordinates, right? And they'd end up in different places, you know. But most of the time, they got a number wrong and they ended up in some sort of parallel universe and stuff like that. I think that's where we're up to now. We're being given slowly but surely the controls to decide which star system we want to go and visit and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you brought up, because I didn't ever watch the series. I watched it when it first came out, one episode, because I was like, hey, MacGyver's on it. But
Yeah.
like, then years later, I was off grid and it was a real long, deep winter. You know, I was teaching the little one how to do snow caves. We had that much snow. I wasn't going anywhere. And someone lent me their series. And so I watched it. And the fact that I'm glad that I did. There's a bunch of stuff about it, but one of the things I'm just going to bring up real quickly is they had the highest following of all. They had more views, people tuning in live to it, than any other series that was canceled. And that drew my attention, because usually that's because they're telling you too much truth or something, right?
Yeah.
And the premise of this show, I'm not going to mess anything up for anybody who wants to watch it. This is the premise of basically every episode, is that there were ET parasites, the ET DNA, and they latched on to your brainstem, and they controlled the vessel. And it was this gods and goddesses story of like ancient Egypt that we've been spun. And what's really fascinating is that's exactly what I'm talking about regarding the brainstem and the there's a lot, the pineal gland has a lot to do with the hippocampus and what's happening in that activation. But this is all, they were telling us about it. They were telling us about it in that show. It's so bizarre. And then the background that you have behind you looks kind of like a Stargate.
Yeah, that's why I love it so much. I mean, because they're all different star systems. There's 12 of them, but in the middle, and the middle to me is number 13, which to me represents, for me at least, the Christ center. You know, it's the control center. And we've been up there, like there's 12 disciples up there, or 12 skills or frequencies, or even time dimensions because of the different frequencies. I think that once you sort of open your heart more and more, that Christ ability within us, or whatever we're going to call that, right? It gets the ability then to say to the disciples, Peter, shut up, right? You know, upon this stone I will build my church. You're going on too much, Peter, so shut up and let Matthew have his say, because he's something important here. And I think what happens then is those 12 coordinate with one another like an orchestra, all playing different things at different frequencies. And it's coming in now, like we start to get that, you know. And like you were saying before, is we not only get expanded understanding of these 12 things, because I think that they're linked to the 12 cranial nerves, but we get an expansion, but we also get at the Christ center a focus as well. Yeah. You know, and I think that over the last few weeks, especially maybe months, there's been so many distractions and temptations and everything coming in, right, that I've been being knocked off my feet. But I think I'm being trained in just let those go and just focus on the job you've been given. And I think that's to me like a laser, really, more than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got no idea what I'm going on about here, but I'm sure it's like
No, it's exact. I think everyone. So I like check in with different Telegram groups and stuff when I'm going through, and we all were kind of sort of describing what you just described. Like some of the people were saying how they were just all of a sudden they're just like a lot of like issues coming into their lives, and like with me, my example was that people are like, I mean, people who really don't know anything about me are like mad at me for being on my porch. Like, I mean, I'm not even really sure, like, and those types of things that some people are talking about, just like you said, a lot of what we kind of consider, we joke about it. But what the Mercury in retrograde story ends up being is that what's happening is that um, your need to feel included and your just drive to like feel like back in power again, like it's associated with the second voice, which is the reptilian brain, right?
yeah,
And um as a result, the joke of Mercury retrograde, people say often anyway, is that a lot of times people will get back with their exes and then regret it once Mercury is no longer in retrograde motion. But which, by the way, Mercury leaves retrograde on the 7th, which is on Monday. It's just a couple of days. We have a weekend left. And then the 9th is National Unicorn Day, by the way.
very good.
So all of this stuff has having to be associated with all with the same thing, and we're all in this like. So a lot of people maybe noticing that they're feeling they need to connect with their exes or get with people that they're not in resonance with. At the same time, Joe, as we're in this window of accelerated shedding of relationships,
Yeah, yeah.
more and more you're noticing those around you are leaving or they no longer resonate with you somehow, and so you're no longer having those friendships or family relationship. Doesn't have to be romantic always.
No, no, I agree entirely. And lots of people get onto me to say this is happening, that's happening. And my thing is that it's not, you don't need to do a geographical and maybe leave the person. It's just that you need to just follow your own soul's promptings now. And what tends to happen in some relationships, at least, is they get honest and say, well, I'm not interested in going out with you anymore because I'm bored to death with seeing all these dogs training and stuff like that. I want to go and do this because I'm happier doing that, And if you get honest, and one person says, well, go on then, off you go. So the bonds between them start splitting, which is necessary, right? And they do their own thing then. And then they seem to come back together at night time because they both enjoyed themselves individually, but they seem to get back together then. And there seems to be like a coordination in the middle at night time, sitting on the couch, and it's a very strange thing. But I'm not saying that everybody should stick together because it's clear that in some cases we need to geographically, dislocate ourselves and stuff. So how do you know the best thing and what's for you? Open your heart and ask the question, please show me clearly, right? Do I stay or do I go? And my suggestion to people is, because I'm only passing on suggestions here, right, is if you're not sure, don't make any rash decisions, because what's for you will come to you, but maybe not in your time. And that's a really hard one, because I'm having to say to people quite forcefully, no, that's because you want it to happen now, right? But it might not be coming to, it mightn't come to fruition for another 3 months' time. So this is not about anything else other than be patient and wait for it to arrive, rather than pushing it because you may cause more trouble than you think, and stuff. It's about developing patience in it. And what is patience? Patience is allowing whatever's to happen to emerge in the correct time, according to innate intelligence, not what the ego wants, really.
Yeah, definitely. Can I stay or should I go now? When you said that, I was singing the song in my head too.
Yeah.
She's like
Should
earworm
I
song.
stay or should I go?
Yeah. I totally resonate with that. I find that more and more as we learn to go with the flow, let go, and like you said, it is more of a lazy pond or a lazy river instead of a highway traffic, situation. And as we flow more and more, it's apparent that when it's meant to be, whatever it is, we're not talking about relationships only here. You know, if it's meant to be, it will be effortless. And
Yeah.
if it's not meant to be, there will be often I find they'll give me three where there's like some kind of stop, something that
Yeah.
stops it. Even just gently. It's like tapping the brake, and it's like, you know what? Maybe I'm gonna not come over today. I'll stay home for today. And then it turns out something has occurred, and it's like, well, thank you for the validation, but I already trusted you. And so if it feels hard, then it's not your job right now. You know, so that's actually what Archangel Michael told me back in 2020 when they kept showing me I was going to be doing, like, I saw it as a TV show, which is basically a TV show, that I'm doing now.
Yeah,
And
of course.
I'm that person who didn't even FaceTime somebody. I never got pictures of myself. I took pictures of others. And when I laughed, and also, like, no, like, there's no way that's going to happen. And um, what Archangel Michael said, and it's the most perfect, I use it still all the time because it's true, is that if it's hard, it's not your job.
Yeah.
Like, we're not talking about, using muscles that you've not used for a while. We're talking about other things. Like, and at the time, I was a full-on introvert, and I still am have introverted tech, aspects. However, during that time, in between then and who I became, I naturally flowed into it. I didn't expect to do YouTube. I didn't think that I was actually going to do that. I didn't have any plans to do any of the things that I'm doing now. But when I released my desired need to drive and just said, okay, we're going to go with what's easy. And what ended up being easy led me to do a YouTube channel, to have a Telegram community, to have I'm surprised by the following on Facebook lately. I'll look over at that and it's like, dang, and I'm not, I'm not anybody special. I'm just me, but the point here is I'm living a life that there's no way I would agree to if I
Yeah.
was still at the emotional state that I was when they first showed it to me. And everything, letting yourself follow that flow and let go of the control, leads you to where you're meant to go.
I agree. I agree. And I do start to see that the curriculum is set before we came here. I can see that. I feel this for me. It's a soul's curriculum. It's like the soul, whatever this is, right, is in the careers office, right, or the curriculum school. They say, what do you want to do next, son? And you go, I think I'll try that one there, that alcoholic one. That looks interesting. Oh, and they go, yeah, it's a bit of a tough one, that, there'll be this and that, and they tell you everything that's coming up. And then you go through that veil of forgetfulness. And
Yeah.
people say, right, I shouldn't have signed up for this. It's too hard, But it's amusing to me, because it's amusing to me today because I feel great, But tomorrow there might be a whole load of shit pouring on my head, But
Right.
here's the thing: I'm not in the slightest bit bothered about dying anymore at all. I was always afraid of dying. I'm not in the slightest bit bothered. If I drop dead tomorrow, then so be it. It's park run tomorrow, right? I've nearly died on park run before, right?
Right.
I don't know whether I ever told you or you ever heard, but I'm on a park run 3 years ago, right? And before me, right, opens up a bloody great portal. It was as clear as anything. It was a swirling vortex of energy, a bloody great one. A bit like that thing behind you now, right? And the one behind me, right? It was swirling like that. And I thought, what's that, right? And I got this sense of dive through it or stay here, and people call this choice points and stuff like that. Anyway, that night I had a heart attack, right? Okay. And so I got rushed into hospital, but they took all the bloods and stuff like that, and they weren't sure. So they let me out, right? Anyway, a week further on from that, I had the heart attack that near saw me off, right?
Wow.
And I had to get rushed. They said I had probably about 20 minutes to go. I had to have a stent put in and all this sort of stuff, And I don't know, and I'm there. Sort of people around me were really worried, and I could see the fear in their faces and stuff like that. And I'm there thinking, I wonder what's going on and what's going to happen next. I wasn't bothered in the slightest. Anyway, cut a long story short, I won't take medications. I get a feeling of you don't need to take that and all that. I'm not opposed to taking medications if they're used in the right amount for the right condition at the right time. I've got to say that, because it's important. Because sometimes I think just sending out love and light when there's something physical going on is probably not strong enough. That's just my view. I could be wrong, but I'm only... Anyway, cut a long story short, I've had no medications now for 2 years for my heart. It's improved by 8 percentage points now. I've gone from being moderate heart failure back into mild heart failure and close to normal. And they told me that it was unlikely that my left ventricular function would improve. And it has, Miller, you're right. It has, because I use meditation, imagination, and breath, and I send that to these places in my body. And I just assume that energy, that healing energy, is taking care and having a word with the cells themselves, But I'm only saying this for me now. This is my story. What works for anybody else, I don't know, But it gives me loads of hope. As you know, I was 70 years of age a couple of weeks ago, right? I'm just about to come up and do my 21st marathon, right? And really, I'm quite proud of myself.
Yeah. And man, you have a lot of really cool numbers happening right now. Like 70th year, 33rd. How long you been married?
13 years.
That's 13. Dude, I knew it. Dude, that was going to be an important number too. This is the year for you, Joe.
So people keep telling me that. And me, I go, well, we'll wait and see, you see, because that's where I'm up to, right? We'll wait and see. And they said to me, add up your days of your birthday. And it was 1903, 1955. And when you add all those up, it comes to 33. And I think, oh, there we go again.
Yeah, you'll find, and it's the 4-4 portal. You'll find a repeating number frequency this year, usually too, like in important big deal years like this. And of course, this is this is kind of like a portal, different kind of portal than a portal. They say 4-4 portal. That means like it's a repeated, but this particular portal is drawing in all the elements this time. The way that it's happening is the four corners. It's the wind. It's it's all the elements. It's also it's the 4 is symbolic of like foundation and stability, balance, finally returning to balance. All of that stuff all happening on such a synchronicity of all the years that you're having. It's not just for you. Everybody's going to have a big year, but for you in particular, Joe, I'm really going to be interested to follow your story.
Yeah, I feel really enthusiastic about it. Really. I do have this underlying sort of upsurging type feeling, because 4 is important to me because of quadrants. So 4 quadrants: body,
Right.
mind, soul, spirit. Because I talk about soul and spirit as well. So there's a refinement and a differentiation of frequencies as we go up or come down. So I talk about that. But not only that, there's gross, subtle, causal, and non-dual levels of energy as well. So I've looked into all this as well. So the 4 quadrants, but where they meet is the 5th element. I keep getting that close.
Yeah.
Once they're all in harmony, that's when the 5th element appears. And I think it's the 5th element then that takes over and draws all those things together and starts to untangle the knots and basically knit them all together. And I see it as like, the string theory. Well, I see it like as tube theory. I see different tubes, like water coming into them, and there's knots in it. So we're untangling the knots or taking the stones out of them, and they're all starting to flow into one another. So I get tributaries and tribulations, whatever that means, stuff. Oh, there you go. There you go then.
Did you hear that lightning?
I did, yeah, I did.
Wow, the fact you could hear it on a noise canceling microphone, that was loud. Thor just said yes.
Yeah,
That's funny.
it's amazing, and I love all this, because the people I've met, and once upon a time, I would have thought they're all nutters, it's like a psychiatric department, this, but I see now that when I was in the psychiatric department, and I was in there many times,
Yeah.
I can see the people who were talking to me then, right, had more of a clue what was going on, right, than those who were outside, so everything's turning around now. And that's why when I talk to people like Elsa, this is who I am now. These are the things that are happening to me. Take it or leave it. I really don't care anymore. Right.
Yeah. 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 It's definitely where, well, once you're able to release, this is the message of spirit. Actually, this is the words that they say, saying what you just said, basically, is that they're, oh, lately it comes in a lot. Like, don't forget to tell people, this, is that to suspend disbelief, and they use the word notion in anything. Just suspend your notion regarding any aspect of reality, at least for 5 minutes every day. That's their message. Do this for 5 minutes every day. There's no negative outcome that's possible for spending 5 minutes and pretending that the likelihood of all the things that we talk about is true. Like, and then whatever logic explanation comes in, just dismiss it for a moment, just for those 5 minutes. And because it's in the belief is the fuel that um, pushes this vehicle, that powers the vehicle. And when we have a limited amount of belief, we're tapping the brakes, and so the result that you're seeking cannot come fully into fruition. So that's the message. And it's very much what you just said in just different words. And that's so cool that you're getting the same messages as me.
No, but I mean, we are linked. We've known that anyway, haven't we, for a long time, that we're linked. And it's almost like you get a certain group of people that when we get together, everything just starts flowing in from different directions. It's a bit like Mella I've done light language all my life without realizing it. But once they're starting to come in now, the 12 channels are coming in with different voices and different frequencies and different smells and everything, And this is basically Kabbalistic. I didn't know anything about the Kabbalah or the Kabbalah, but I know now. And the thing that stuff comes into me and then I sort of read it for confirmation afterwards. I'm not reading stuff for information to take it in. I'm reading it now and it goes like that. See, we told you, we're giving you the right information here. And you could pick up a comic and it would give you confirmation, So yeah. That's how my life seems to work now. I'm sort of that trusting of what's coming in that I'm just trying my best I'm not trying my best. I'm doing my best just to try and take action on the information as it's coming in, really. I feel great, talking tonight. I feel absolutely fantastic. I feel open. I feel flowing. I feel positive, Now, some naysayer will come in, yes, but this too shall pass, right? And what I say to them is, it normally begins with F, but I'll say, go and piss off, piss off.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Because then when we do that, when we listen to the brainstem, the reptilian brain, the lower brain, whatever words people want to use for it, when we listen to the naysayer in the back of the class, then we release the possibility of experiencing the euphoria in that moment. Like you could also bring it back in. The likelihood of you being in this euphoric state is 100% at any given time. You have 100% of what you need to be 100% happy 100% of the time.
Yeah.
It's just how are you going to choose to use that? Or are you going to put yourself back in the box again? Shame, blame, remorse, suffering, not worth it. You're not worthy. Those types of words that people say to themselves, is a program that we're turning off. And when you turn that stuff off, then you get to bask in the sunlight of the spirit.
I love it. And that's what AA taught me as well, because AA, right, they give you the tools that the ego or the illness or the evil or whatever you want to call that thing, the illness or the disease, they give you the tools of how it manifests. And basically it manifests in misery, in negative emotion and all that. So they say, look out for those things. So here's a few. Anger is easy to pick up, right? And people are angry because they're not getting their own way. Oh, when they told me these things, I thought, oh Christ, it's either because some person, place, thing, situation, or event isn't happening in the way that you expect it to, right?
Yeah.
That's because, Joe, you're playing God, right? Right. So why don't you just let it go? Let them get on with it. Don't
Yeah.
compare yourself to others because everybody's unique, and just go and find some joy in your life, right?
Yeah.
And what really pisses people off is when you laugh and you joke, it pisses most people off in the way
I
that the world
know.
is, right? Especially in the environment. When I work in hospitals and in health and medicine, right? I'm
Oh
laughing and
no.
joking and telling jokes, and those so-called academics or those higher. I mean, there's no one higher than me as such, but they look at me as if to say, "Will you behave yourself responsibly, please?" And I've been told that. I did a talk once in this great big lecture theatre, and I was trying to put across the joys of expressing yourself through Tai Chi and yoga and stuff. And I got onto the table, right? And I was doing this Tai Chi form, and all the audience was laughing. Anyway, I got a complaint from one person to say that it was inappropriate, and I got into a lot of trouble as a consequence of it. So about 120 people were happy and laughing, right? And one person said it was inappropriate behavior, right? I have this phrase now, and I know that you'll understand this. GFY, it means two things now. Guys, either go fuck yourself, right? Or if they complain, they'll say, "Why are you saying that? I know what it means." And I said, "No, it means good for you. Good for you."
Yeah, I like
I'm
that.
agreeing with what you say. Oh, they went, oh, because I can't help it, Miller. My job is as a Heyoka, like you, right? My job is right to take the piss out of people, right?
Yeah.
You know
Yeah. And it's been the job for our whole life. We just didn't realize it maybe sometimes.
exactly,
In
exactly.
fact, I thought I was going to be a stand-up comedian when I got older. That's really what do you think you were going to be when you were a kid?
A priest. I
You were
was
going to
sent away at 11 years of age to start my priest training, right? Because the family wanted me to be a priest, and so did I, actually, to be honest. And in a strange sort of way, I've become one, right? But not
Yeah.
the religion type, more the spiritual type. And mostly, I think more people say to me, "What shall I do next?" And I say, "Look, I don't know what I should do next. I'm waiting for the information to come through. All I can do is try and plug you back into your heart and say what you're looking for is in there. Because if I give you some exercise or advice and you go and take it and it doesn't work, you're going to blame me, right? You're responsible. Go in there, dig deep, listen to what it's saying, then act upon that. It'll change your life. And
Yeah.
that's all I can do now is because I honestly believe through mindful breathing and through movement and all the stuff I do in workshops, right? I believe that if you can help somebody tune back into their own intuition, then their intuition or their guardian angel or their higher self, whatever that thing is that guides us, or the Holy Spirit, that will tell them one breath at a time how
Yeah.
to navigate through the world. And then they're personally responsible for that then.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. And the breath, there's so much to the breath too that you brought in, like, because that's laughter. That's the laughter. If you laugh while holding your breath, that actually activates your heart chakra. It's the weird, you think about it. We used to do it when we were little kids and we stopped for some reason, but, and the story of have you ever heard of laughing yoga?
Yeah, absolutely. I can demonstrate some in a minute, really, about the solar plexus chakra.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so what you do is if you can get a laugh going, but you can actually direct it from the solar plexus. Well, but what happens is that's a powerful energetic technique that unblocks the solar plexus. And sometimes the laughter can bring up all sorts of tears as well, right?
Yeah.
So it's a way to actually open the solar plexus through an open and flowing heart, right? And generally speaking, because there's things on YouTube and TikTok or whatever it's called now, showing people laughing on the train, and after about
Yeah.
5 minutes, everybody's laughing and stuff. It's
I've done
infectious,
that.
isn't it? Yeah, it's infectious. But I think I remember being at school. I must have been about 15 or 16 or something, and we had the Christmas play on. And the lead fella in the Christmas play, he got ill. So they said, Delaney, you get on, right? His part, right? Oh,
Oh, your
virtual
background.
background. I'm not sure what happened there. Restarting it. So it doesn't matter anyway. So I jumped in and took his role over, right? And I just fell into it naturally, you know. So I call myself scientist, showman, shaman, and scoundrel. That's how I sort of think.
And scoundrel.
Because you know, I love it. I love the show. It's who I naturally am. But part of me, when I was getting into it, thinking, oh, that's all egomania. It's who I really am. It's my skill, because I seem to be able to get a message across in an amusing way that's got deep significance, really. You know.
Yeah. That makes so much sense to me. It's so, anytime that we tell a story with a laugh in it, that story is remembered for twice as long or more.
Yeah.
Like that's how it works for me. And it's always worked in my life. I remember, I mean, out of 10 kids, I was always getting in trouble for laughing. Like my dad would wake up to my laughing, you know, like that was just, and I never felt like it was a good idea to agree with him and to stop. He was a violent man, so there was always a result to it, but it was worth it. You know what I mean? Like what's a life when you don't, or what is an experience like life without laughter? You know, it's empty, it's void, it's and not only that, but the demonstration that you just showed us, like that was really cool. You did that. Like you could feel it like rippling up from your solar plexus, your sacral solar plexus, and come up to like the in between the heart and the throat chakra space. Like it was that giddiness. And you know, anybody can do it. It turns out it's not illegal. You can go out to a public place and just start laughing. If you want to kind of like, you know, maybe inspire it, watch us something that's funny on your phone and like have your buds in or something, but get yourself started. And once you get going, those around you start laughing. It's so contagious, and it changes everyone's next at least 72 hours of their life, you know, in a profound and healing way. And so like Elizabeth, that's infectious. It really, and then you got Elsa laughing, you know, you got everybody laughing on here. It's, you know, it made that type of message can be transferred to any place, any dimension, every walk of life. That's the truest communication, you know, and I thank you for doing that.
No, it's a pleasure. But that's
There's
when I do this stuff.
you can go. Sorry.
No, what happens is that the energy then comes up, because I mean I still repress stuff and things like that, you know, so that just cleared a big thing in me now, and I can feel it much more clear. But what comes up is, it's amazing how the throat wants to keep hold of that and contain it and push it back down again, even in that quite energetic process, you know. So I'm always learning myself, really. And I think it's widening channels. But I've made a mental note of that, to maybe do that more often for myself as well, really. But that's where Rock comes from, you know. Rock, when he comes in, what happens is it goes the other way around. It starts off at the solar plexus. I can open my heart up, and then it can go down then into the sacral and the root chakras, right? It's, you know, we talked about tubes. Well, if you consider all the tubes down there, it almost like opens the tube up from your perineum and connects with the ground. It's a very strange thing. But once because I do a lot of sort of energy type exercises, it's almost like that perineum area, you know that Uranus.
Yeah.
We go again. Right. We'll be getting onto rings again in a minute, but it's almost like a tube goes out from there, sucks onto the ground, and it goes right up my spine and out through the crown of my head. And when I've got that flowing feeling, that's when all this information starts to come in, you know. And I'm trying to teach this in workshops in the university and stuff like that. I just have to look at some of their faces, you know, and it just makes me laugh. Right. No, but I think academia's had its day now. I think there's going to be much more work, mindful workshops and stuff like this, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that it's coming more and more to the surface. It's more acceptable. Yeah, there still are those individuals. There are, very not okay with laughter, and they can have their cup of tea over there. That's fine. Like it I find that it draws in those energies that I desire, and it sends out or repels those that I don't. So it works great. It's a way to filter out the energy spheres that are collecting around you and balance them to what's more in alignment with your current energy that you're keeping. So, like, I've never cared. I've always been that person. Like, I got so much trouble for being the class clown. Like, that was they even had meetings before class started. I walked in one time and the bell hadn't rung yet, and everybody was sitting there looking at the teacher, and they looked at me and she's like, "Out." And so I went out until the bell rang and then I could come in. They had a meeting about me, it turned out. The whole class was to not encourage me.
That's just brought back memories for me as well. In secondary school, they used to strap me because we used to get strapped. We used to get corporal punishments. They used to
Yeah.
strap me before I went in, so I'd behave myself in the class. You know what I mean?
Before you
There
did
was
anything.
always before we do anything. Yeah, it was a warning, really. So I get 2 of the strap or the cane before I went into the class, and stuff. I was very paradoxical, my upbringing, because on the one hand I was joking a lot, but on the other hand I was also frightened as well, So it was almost like my way of acting the clown to distract myself from the fear, because I was very afraid. And the way they were Christian brothers, it was very, very powerful Catholic upbringing and stuff. So it was very disciplined, and I was afraid all the time, So maybe that's why I developed the clown, or maybe it's just because I was being helped at that time by who I essentially am, really.
Yeah.
I don't know, Mela. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but interesting.
Yeah. I totally resonate with that. For me too. I mean, I laugh through the tears I used to talk about our family doing. I remember that being like, it's a coping mechanism. And at least it was at that time. It still is in some ways, but not in the way that there still needs to be those underlying causations still need to be addressed. We can't laugh through it and pretend it's not there either,
No.
unless we're thriving or existing or surviving through that trauma. And
Yeah.
that's why PTSD is what it is. The flashbacks come around when you're emotionally mature enough to process whatever it is that you couldn't at the time. Sometimes it's not that you're immature emotionally exactly. It's just that there was a lot of different layers, and that
Yeah.
in its bulk was too much. And so give yourself. I feel like that's the complaint more often than anything else that I'm getting these days from people is they feel like they're behind in their healing or something.
Yeah.
And like you notice that you need healing when it's time to do the healing. So if you're noticing it, it's time to start. Where do you start? Meditation is always the go-to place for me. When it comes to the beginning of that. And sometimes it feels like daydreaming because the things that you're meant to see and hear are echoes from a time earlier in your life that feel kind of like daydreams.
I agree. They say we're only as sick as our secrets. I mean, that could be taken negatively, but we push stuff down that's painful, hoping that it never sees the light of day. But I honestly feel, and being serious now for a second, that this great big wave of cleansing, this purging that's going on, is bringing stuff up that we've pushed down and repressed, right? So that we can face it full on, right? Sit with it, watch it, allow the energy that's been keeping it down to dissipate, and then we can let go of it then, And I think what I was saying before is, and I really hammer this point home, is it's got to be sequential, though. And if it's sequential, it can't be given to you by your logical, intellectual mind. It's got to come up and emerge as a little sort of message from your heart or even from your soul, Because the way I see it is the heart's got gates. And I think once the gates are open, you can go deeper then and access your soul. And if you can start listening to the soul, that will guide you as to the next action. Because to me, Release is a program of action. It's not a program of theory or thinking or anything. It's it's got to be done because the action will ground it and it helps to create new neural pathways. I mean, there's loads of neuroscientific evidence now to suggest. And what you mentioned before is there's a lot of positive. There's what's called toxic positivity. And I see this a lot in the spiritual communities. Oh, yes, you can. It's almost like a boot camp approach. That God's with you now and everything can be sorted out. I used to believe that, right? But now I see it differently. And it's almost like that poem, the Desiderata, it says, beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourselves, right? And I think I talk to lots of people and they're so self-critical. It's unbelievable, as I was, nothing I did was ever good enough, right? And that was just a program. Like you said before, I got clearly before this is just tell them, Joe, it's a program because in the beginning was the word and everything else then was made up. So you can just wipe out everything, right? And you can start making up a new life from tomorrow morning. So it's entirely up to you. And we're not the chosen ones, we're the choosing ones, because they feed me with the lines, you know what I mean? Right.
Yeah.
The choosing ones.
Right. I really like that. And that other you is your higher self, as some people call it. Like it's it's so bizarre how it works out, how it's done spiritually speaking, energetically speaking. It almost feels like we're simultaneously incarnated in all possible incarnations that will have occurred. And so sometimes you're talking to somebody else and you realize that you're the same soul aspect from just maybe a different, it's weird. It's so cool to see that more and more of us are kind of congregating, like coming together and sharing our experiences this way. We can see that, we can get validation from it, of course, and that helps you in your self-belief, that journey that we're learning to no longer disbelieve yourself, and just trust and believe in your own energy and what you're getting is actually fact. Then we can get the validation because someone else got the same message and you didn't tell them what the message was. They told you what their message was, and I don't know, like these kind of conversations like I'm having with you right now, it's just kind of, it's so cool to get together with other aspects of the soul that you are a greater part of, and almost like you can remember being other people who are currently incarnated. It's
I
weird.
know. I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I've had this thing about dimensional shifts and leaping and stuff for a long time. I've never understood it, but I've always been attracted to things about. There's a film called Somewhere in Time. It was Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour, right? And I watched this, and I was crying my eyes out because I understand that great big time dimensional sort of longing. And there was another one from Canada. There's a series on called Continuum, and it was almost like that they came back from the future in order to help and stuff like this. So those things have always attracted me, and I think whatever you're attracted to is giving you clues about your purpose. I think that. So if you have an enthusiasm about something, look deeper into it and ask your intuition, what are you trying to show me here? So all those time leaping things and all that, I'm very much into that. But as you've just said, I also have feelings, that the ancient Egypt one, which is quite a common one, but even further back than that, to Sumeria, to all this, and I have a big thing about not so much Atlantis, but Lemuria, and these things. And I don't understand how it happens, but I sort of do, but I don't understand. But there are certain times where it just appears right in front of me, and I think, well, okay, what's it all about? And it's amazing. And that's why I said to you before, I feel like I'm only scratching the surface. I really don't know what's going on, but I sort of do in a strange sort of a way.
Yeah. Yeah. I resonate very much with the Lemuria story too. And just that's my first memory that I've had my whole life was from what ended up being the fall that we call the fall of Atlantis, things about that. um, and leading up to it, like there were several years, like at least 2 years before it happened. Like people knew about it for 2 years ahead, and all of that stuff, and I don't feel like it's very important to share that story of mine anymore too much because I had to work through the trauma of it in this lifetime, and that's why I was talking about it so much at one point. And now it's almost like with the Arcturians. I know this was weird, a weird download that I got. It was from Arcturians, but they were saying that they're currently correcting our history. Please stand by.
Yeah, love it. Love
Yeah,
it.
and I was like, random, like there was no other explanation, nothing. It's like it was just, but I understood it that it felt like the undoing of occurrences, the things that had once happened are no longer having had happened because time isn't linear like we think of it as being.
Yeah, no, I understand, and I see that all the time. Is that it's a rescripting, if you like, or it's turning off some expressions of genes and turning on others, really. So I see 00101110, all those things, as great big strings of numbers, and then they show me that each number has got a different resonant frequency, and so it gets into morphogenetics then, and morphic resonance, and I sort of understand how it all works for a second or two, and then it leaves me. So sound and light and vibration, I think that's the way forward. I'm going to a lecture next week. It's one of my friends is giving a big posh lecture, and she's going to talk about radio imaging and using basically quantum science, right, for diagnostic purposes. And I'm going to jump in and say, well, we're using all these energies for diagnostic purposes. Why can't we turn it round and use it for therapeutic purposes? So I'm going to I'm gonna make it awkward for her because she's given an inaugural lecture. So I've got a few awkward questions for her to start off with, because that's part of my fun as well. But honestly, I see that if it can go in one way, it can come out another way as well. And like you said at the start of this, I think that if we tune into the guidance we're getting, we can almost like use tuning, frequencies on different dials.
Yeah.
And it's almost like basically driving a spaceship type thing, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's the whole like balancing of it for every different frequency you want to tune into. And we do it all. That's what jumping timelines really is. That's what we're doing. And like I don't think that it only happens when you're waking up from a dream. We most often do it then, where it can be pretty much measured, and often we'll think of it'll be slight differences that have occurred that we're able to notice, but we'll discount them and say, oh, maybe that was really red instead of blue, or whatever. It's very slight things. And sometimes even bigger ones come. But what's happening is we're choosing a different and how it's working out in our energy now is that each new one that we're choosing, so like these little streams behind me would be timelines, each one we're going up and up and up, where before we kind of were in this static space, we were going back up and down, and it's what you expect. That's the trick. Expect to whatever it is that you desire. And what's more is you're not expecting a thing. I don't expect to wake up to like a pile of gold, for instance. Instead, feel the sensation of that abundance, the result of having all that you need, and just the emotion that's a part of that, rather than the item and what you're going to buy. It's just kind of that kind of a concept is what's coming in new for a lot of people. And so it's been such an honor being part of that guidance of these individuals that have come in and asked how to meditate, because it's something that I'm still learning too. I mean, meditate, but I meant manifest.
I agree. I think there's two things that we've got: ego desires. I mean, that thing, The Secret. People were like using it at a sort of a head level, really. And I think there's the head desires, Right. They're the normal, like want a big car, want loads of money, big house, blah, 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 blah. Right.
Right.
But then there's the soul's desires. So it's okay if you can tune into what the soul desires and go with that, really. I think that's the surrender people are talking about. Because I say thousands of times in the day, thy will, not mine, be done. Because I can feel the ego kicking in. But thy will means soul, take over. Right. I'll try and listen to where you're trying to guide me, and I'll try and follow that, you know. And I'm not bothered if I make mistakes anymore, because I'm still learning like everybody else, really.
Oh yeah.
Mela, I've got to go now. It's getting
Yeah,
late
I gotta
here.
go too. I was just
Yeah, yeah,
thinking the same thing.
yeah, yeah. It's been fascinating. This. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah,
Maybe we can have another one further down the line. See where we're up to then.
I'd very much like that. Thank you. Yes. Thank you
Okay,
very
and
much for coming.
I quite like this chat. Except you can see my bookcase there with all me. I'm glad I didn't have my underpants hanging on the thing drying and stuff like that.
Yeah, it looks great. You're lucky you don't have anything crazy going on.
Yeah, I've got some good books on the back shelf there. There's some cracking books, you know, but I don't read books anymore. I prefer to watch a YouTube thing, just relaxing and get the information that way.
Yeah. There's so
Anyway,
much down.
so thanks very much, and thanks very much everybody for tuning in. I hope you've got something from that, and yeah, I've got nothing
Thank
more
you.
to say, which is unusual for me.
Well, yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody too. Thank you for everybody who came. It's been fun to kind of. There's been a few synchronicities. We had 88 people at one point. You know, like, and that was just when you were saying the thing about the numbers of synchronicity, and you were 33 years, 70 years, 13, and then there. Oh, and we're doing on the 4/4 portal. We started at 8 o'clock, which is doubled fours in your time, and then it was 88. Anyway, I thought that was really cool. Synchronicities
Oh,
are everywhere.
they are, and more, I'm being guided to pay attention to them, really.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thanks everybody, and I'm off to bed now. And see you when I see you.